This is how they get you scammed. Watch it.
I'm sick of multi-millionaires telling kids who can't afford to turn the heating on, you just need to be more entrepreneurial. It's sick, Dan, it's sick.
Well, your video where you talk about if you don't have a rich dad, you're screwed. Well, to me, if I had have come across your content at 19, 20 years old, I would have been screwed.
My friends can't feed their kids, okay? If it was that easy, why is everybody not doing it?
I'll tell you why people aren't doing it. It's because...
Can I just say one thing back on that? Do you think the reason the average Brit or American are getting poorer is because they don't know how to create wealth?
No, the reason people are getting poorer is because of big governments, record levels of taxes, an outdated schooling system, technology, and remote working.
You sure about that?
How do you disagree with those opinions?
Living standards are falling because of growing wealth inequality. If you allow the rich to get richer, they squeeze the middle class and the poor class out of things like housing. Let's cut tax on people who are working hard, and let's raise tax on the richest and most powerful people in the world.
That's an overly simplified view of things.
Even if your company turns over £1 million, that's not your £1 million.
Wow.
From 100,000 to 125,000, for every pound you earn, you lose your personal allowance. In terms of people that attack other people for earning so much money, I think the energy that you're using to attack such people, you should use that energy to educate yourself.
I never ever wanted to have this conversation. Tax avoidance is legal.
Yes.
Tax evasion is illegal.
Yeah.
Think about some of the wealthiest people that I know. They have some of the lowest salaries. Tax the rich, tax the rich. The easiest people to tax are those that are earning PAYE.
If you don't like it here, move. You are not a tree.
Ooh.
You can move. Go and test the waters if you're so sad.
Fairs. I'm black, I'm ethnic, I have to be Labour.
People think that Labour is better for working class people. And this is why I say people need to educate their ignorance. No shade. It is what it is.
We now have 1,000 millionaires a month leaving, which means every ordinary person who pays 10 grand a year in tax will now have to pay 20 grand a year in tax. You end up cutting off your nose to spite your face.
If we are a country that don't try and do things which are necessary because they are hard, then our kids will live in poverty.
What do you want people to do?
There's a lot of different ways.
Buckle up.
In 2008, all the interest rates go to zero. So suddenly, our job is basically predicting and betting on when will those interest rates go back up, which is when will the economy recover. And this is super interesting, right? In 2008, because all the interest rates went to zero so quickly, like before 2008, it's important to remember, rates would move from like 5.5 to 5.25. And then here in 2008, everywhere in the world slashing to zero.
Boom, 0.5%.
Exactly. And everybody, all the economists were like, wow, this is going to cause a massive recovery because they thought that interest rates were powerful. And everybody predicted that rates would come back up in 2009, which of course we now know they didn't. Then everybody predicted that rates would go up in 2010, which we now know they didn't. And then at the beginning of 2011, everybody was predicting rates will definitely go up this year. And this to me was so interesting because, you know, I studied maths and economics at one of the best economics universities in the world. And now I'm working with these traders who are getting paid £1 million a year to predict the economy, to predict the interest rates. And everybody is wrong year after year after year. And this was so amazing to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's like, wow, like this is a big thing that we as a society should understand, and like we're getting it wrong. But secondly, if all of the best guys in the world are getting this wrong, then if I can figure this out, I can make a ton of money here.
Gary, how much money did you make for Citibank at the age of 24 years old?
Just over $35 million. I think there is a naivety in this country, in places like the US, that the kind of inequality, the kind of broad poverty that you see in places like South Africa, in places like Nigeria, in places like India, can't happen here. It will happen here.
Like for anyone who is not tapped into digital economy, fast growth and all of that sort of stuff, life is getting harder and worse. If you lower people's economic freedom, more poverty, less affluence, the millionaires and the wealth creators leave, the people who are stuck in dead-end jobs or no jobs get incredibly frustrated.
Was that at the beginning of COVID, the very beginning of COVID, we knew governments across the world were going to be giving out tens of trillions of pounds, dollars, euros. Nobody even thought to ask who's going to get tens of trillions richer. Nobody in the Conservatives, nobody in Labour, nobody in the Republicans, nobody in Democrats, nobody in the media, nobody in academia, nobody at the central banks. Nobody asked this. If we were now to pause the economy for 2 years, and during that pause, massively increase wealth inequality. What do you think would happen to broad living conditions when we unpaused?
See, one of the things that I think happened during the pandemic is everything went digital. And what we see is that the investors know what's going on and they just invest in this Magnificent Seven company. I think 50% of the gains of the S&P 500 is tech companies. Well, after the pandemic.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think the average Brit, American, Australian, wherever the person out there is watching, if they quit their job and go work in tech, do you think they'll be able to get financial security relatively easy?
I think that the way you see the world as a trader is that the world is a zero-sum game and that there's basically the pie is a fixed pie and it gets sliced up.
How fast is the pie growing now?
There's something like this.
What's UK GDP growth at the moment?
Yeah, it's not high, right?
1%.
I'll tell
How
you-
much did your wealth grow in the last year?
Exponentially.
Okay, so if my wealth probably grew about 20% in the last year, maybe 30, okay? If our wealth is growing 30% and the economy is growing at 1%, where's it coming from if it's not coming from our viewers?
No, the reason people are getting poorer is because economic freedoms are being eroded.
But we exist in an economy where wealth is being extracted out of the middle class, out of the working class, very, very rapidly. It's benefiting people like the three of us at this table. It will benefit our kids. You know, our kids will be rich, their kids will be poor. And I just think we should be honest with them. Capitalism's finished. We won. Well done, Stephen. Well done, Daniel. Well done, Gary. It's over now. Our kids will be rich. Their kids will be poor. They'll pay the taxes. We won't pay the taxes. We'll avoid it. I'll make money betting on it year after year. Why are we lying to them? Why are we lying to them? I keep bringing it back to people because the people who watch, we're millionaires, okay? The people who watch us are mostly not millionaires. Is life going to get better for them?
The life will get better if you are connected to the most productive parts of the economy.
About if you're connected to the most productive parts of the economy. I was quite surprised when I was doing some research on this to find that there's quite big differences between the UK and the US in terms of GDP growth. In Q4 2024, the US economy grew by 0.6%, while the UK growth was 0.1%. So they're doing significantly better in that regard. US GDP per head stands at $82,000 per head, whereas the UK stands at $49,000 per head. And stock market performance, which is an indication of, I guess, whatever, rose by 300% in the US, whereas the FTSE 100 declined by 20%, which is the UK stock market. So they seem to be doing better if you just look at the economy. Why is that? Is that because they lean more into technology and to innovation and entrepreneurship? And is it because of the things you were saying earlier about their attitude towards the government, like reduce government spending versus tax the rich? Why? I'm keen to hear Gary's view on this because I understand yours because you've just said it.
Yeah, I think these are great statistics. And of course, the US has a strong reputation for being very free markets and being very small states. In the last 5 years, 10 years.
Why are all these millionaires running away?
Well, it's not because they're taxing their wealth, because we don't have any wealth taxes.
Why do you think they're leaving?
I think the reason they're leaving is because the UK economy is really, really weak. Because the UK consumer is really, really weak. Because we've absolutely crushed the spending power of your average British family.
And where are they
Your average
going?
British family can barely afford to feed the kids and turn the heating on. So why are you going to start a business here when the customers are absolutely impoverished? I will agree 100%. It is difficult to tax rich people.
Yeah.
It is very, very, very difficult to tax rich
So
people.
the difference-
I don't come here saying I want to tax rich people because it's easy. I know it's hard. I know probably I'm going to lose. I know our viewers' kids will live in desperate poverty. I know that. I do this because it is hard. If we are a country which says to ourselves, we don't try and do things which are necessary to keep our kids out of poverty because they are hard, then our kids will live in poverty. I don't need to be here. I'm a multimillionaire, just like you. I could be in the Philippines drinking pina coladas. I come in here because I come from a poor background and it's ordinary families like my family, like the kids I grew up with, whose kids are going to be in poverty. It's difficult, but it is necessary. Sometimes we have to do things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. That is what makes a rich country rich, and that is what protects ordinary people. Listen, our grandparents lived in poverty. Did they say, let's not change it because it's hard? No, they didn't. They fought and they demanded healthcare, education, housing, food, and they got it. They got it.
So you
That's
think
why
we're
my
not demanding
parents
enough?
could live a good quality life. They got those things. They got those things, and they were aware that in order to do that, you could not allow the super rich who have been living lives of luxury for hundreds and hundreds of years to eat everything while ordinary families couldn't afford to feed their kids. I know it's difficult. And I know I'm probably going to lose. I know that. I know I'm probably going to lose, and that means our viewers will be poor. But I do it anyway because I do not want this country that I grew up in to fall into desperate poverty.